Several of you were happy to see Jeannie here this morning. And I just want you to know none of you are more happy than I am to see her. We were talking down the road as we were coming this morning, and I don't want to take a long time for this, but I want you to know how we think. I said, can you believe to her that you've been going to church with me in a car so I could preach many times and you play the piano for more than 65 years? That's amazing. We just don't even think about how old we are, though we're up there. I turned 84 the last couple of weeks. And you're that old? Yeah. Well, I got one more then. Gene will be 85 in just a few more days. We have been blessed so wonderfully through a really difficult time that Jeannie's had the last few weeks. We went to the hospital August the 9th, and we're going to see the doctor again tomorrow that put the stents in her kidney and also in her heart. The medicine has been the thing we've been doing since we've been home, trying to get the right amount of the right thing to keep the blood pressure. And it's better now than it's been in a long, long time. So we're so thankful for that. I know the story I want to tell you real quickly. Jeannie says, well, they've heard this. I said, yeah, they've heard a lot over and over that I keep saying. But if you haven't heard this, I think you'd like it. And if you have before, well, put up with me for just a second. The first church where I was pastor was a little Baptist church at Watt, W-A-T-T, Watt, Texas, east of Waco, about 20 miles. And Jeannie went with me and played the piano, and I was the pastor. And about a year, we served the Lord that way. Now here's, I don't know why this happened this way, except it was the Lord's doing. Would you even consider asking an 18-year-old young man who had a girlfriend and had a longer way to go to college and seminary and all, would you even think about considering him being your pastor? That church did. They called us and invited us to come, and it was a small country church. But then they asked if I would be willing to be their pastor. And we were there for about a year. We moved from there to another church, other side of Waco, and that's when we were married after into that second pastorate. And the thing that I can't help but tell you once again, if you've heard this, enjoy it again. It's not what we did. But there was one older couple. They were older then than we are now. And they were the most faithful couple of people in church, Sunday school, rain, sunshine, and even snow. Doesn't snow much up in Waco, but we had a snow while we were there. And I think there may have been one Sunday that Gene and I drove out from Waco to Watt, and the only two people that showed up were those two people because the weather was so bad. Now the thing that's funny, it's black dirt, and they didn't have paved dirt from their house to church. They could get to about 3/4 of a mile there in the car, and they walked the rest of the time to church. Not every Sunday, but on that particular Sunday. We just thought that was absolutely fantastic as a Christian man and woman to do what they could do at their age, no matter what happened. They were where God wanted them to be. Now, the thing that is so funny, I was 18, Jeannie was barely 19, and they invited us to Sunday dinner. So we go to their house about a mile or so, that's 3/4 of a mile of where you couldn't drive, but we could drive that day. And we went up this direction, little white wood house, small, old. Now some of you won't even know this, but some of you will remember. They had oilcloth on the table, and they kept the peanut butter and the syrup and the honey. They didn't have refrigerators like we do, whatever they had, ice box or whatever you'd call it. And they then would have a red and white oilcloth and then a cover over that. And it was just amazing. We had not been in a house except with our grandparents, anything close to that. They were poor people, but wonderful, wonderful Christian and good people. So she had fixed the meal for us to have Sunday lunch. First time we'd ever done this. We were nervous. We didn't want to, they were just average, round, down to earth, wonderful folk. And so Jeannie was on her best thinking, acting, speaking, and we're going to do it every right, polite. We want them to be impressed with us. We'd already been called. But anyway, so they had it out on the table, and she had, food, this. And Jeannie said, and this Miss Patrick was just a lovely white-haired lady. So Jeannie says, as we had the blessing and then we're ready to get the food, I'm building this up because it's really funny to us. And Jeannie says, Miss Patrick, will you please pass the peas? And she answered, get them yourself. Your arm's a lot longer than your tongue. Just about that mean and blunt. Did you hear what I really said? Get them yourself. Your arm's longer than your tongue. Get it yourself. We just almost died right there. The first time ever as a pastor's wife to be and ask that at the first meal in someone's house as a pastor. And Miss Patrick generally knocked us out of our chairs. And she waited for seemed like 5 minutes, but it was a few seconds. And then she just burst out laughing. And she said, I do that to everyone that eats at my house the first time. Oh, man. Well, that was wonderful, and that was more than 65 years ago. And God has been so good to us to allow us to serve in various places. We do enjoy this church and you folks. We're sorry we were all out of pocket for the last couple of months, but we couldn't do a thing about that. Thank you for being so patient for us. I do want to say one thing. The young man that you heard about who might be interested in God calling him to be your pastor did call me this past week. And we talked for nearly half an hour, I guess. He seems to be a really, really God-called minister, family man. And I found nothing in talking with him that I was at least negative about. I thought it was very, very good. I do not know what God wants, of course. I don't know that he knows or you know at this time. But do pray. Things are moving and people are involved and praying about it, and it may be someone, and I really think if he were to come, he really would be wonderful for you, and you would love him. He's very, very what he ought to be as far as I could find on the telephone, all right? And Jeannie, he was going to send us a check if I said that, so if you will keep that, don't. No, you know better than I don't know where some of this comes from sometime. I didn't plan to say that. It just came out. I guess it's like who was that years ago? The devil made me do it. All right. This morning I want us to think about a passage of Scripture that is a wonderful passage in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 4. I'm looking at it, and it's hard to get it out sometime. I'm looking at three different things at once. Matthew chapter 4, verses 18 through 22. The translation is similar that I'm reading from is of the King James, a little bit different. But let's just see that passage and enjoy this. And the title of the sermon is Fishers of Men. Not fishers of fish, but fishers of men. But they were fishers of fish when this passage begins. And in these verses, things change completely for their lives. All right? Matthew 4, beginning at verse 18. And walking by the Sea of Galilee, Jesus saw two brothers, Simon, who is called Peter, and Andrew his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishers. And he said unto them, Come ye after me, and I will make you fishers of men. And they straightway left the nets and followed him. And going on from thence, he saw other two brothers, James, the son of Zebedee, and John his brother, in the boat with Zebedee, their father, mending their nets. And he called them, and they straightway left the boat and their father and followed him. It's a wonderful passage when you stop and think about it. 4 young men, the father of 2 of these, and they were about their livelihood. They're somewhat young men. It's the beginning of all in their lives. And it would seem that they were satisfied with what they had chosen and what they were doing. One of the set of the brothers, and there are others as well, that were involved with their fathers and following what their fathers had done and had become, and were somewhat satisfied with what God wanted for them and what they wanted to be. Fishermen then were something quite common. There were lots of lakes, seas on some of on the maps that you read, and catching and selling fish was a pretty good way to live your life and to do well. It seems that these two, at least 2 of these two, were working with their father, probably in maybe a business even, where they got the fish and sold the fish, and it was part of their livelihood in order to go in that direction. I want us to think a little bit about what kind of people Jesus was looking for, and also what kind of people that Jesus wanted to come and be part of his close friends and servants of his Father and himself, because Jesus was young too at this point, and he had much to do, and he was under the leadership of his Father, and he had been impressed to bring some young men into what became the first kind of church. And so he needed to invite and to understand and to teach and to work together. And he knew what was happening, and they didn't really. And he comes to these rather special men, but they became more special after he came to them than they had been up until that point. Now, when we're talking about fishers of men, we're saying that Jesus wanted them to go and look for people and know under God's leadership on some special people, and on behalf of Jesus to serve. And so it was very important that these young people would be the right kind and the right ones, and that Jesus could lead them and teach them. But they would have to understand, and they would have to have faith in God and faith in this person who is so different. Well, what kind of people would you look for in a situation like that? Well, let me suggest a couple of things. They were kind of ordinary men. I don't know that if you had seen them and the other people in the area and the group that you could see at the same time there, maybe you would have noticed them a little bit better than some, because they seemed to be the focus right in that area. They lived there. The boys were there. Their father and probably the families of several of them were pretty important to all the folks there. They had good reputations. They worked hard. Some folks had bought fish from them probably. They were always treated fairly. They were people who were honest. They were trustworthy. And they were just ordinary folks. I don't know why. I was thinking about this again this morning, not the first time to think of this particular thing, but I thought you might be interested. I think the first time I thought about it was a long, long time ago. How could you bring a bunch of fresh fish from the seas around and sell that so that people could use it for food 2,000 years ago? No automobiles, no refrigerators, fresh fish. How'd you get it from the lake to where you're going to sell it? You know? You ever think about that? Somebody, I don't even remember where I first heard this. Somebody had asked what I just did, ask, and it was kind of like, well, how could they make a living fishing and getting it to where people would buy it and use it for food in a day like that? How in the world? It would spoil before you could do much with it. Well, what they were saying, and I'm sure this is right, makes sense when you think about it, and that's what people who have thought about it a lot have come to the conclusion, and with history would tell some of that. They carried the fresh fish in water in big wooden barrels, probably. And so as they brought the fish in, the ones they wanted to keep or sell, they would have them in fresh water, as fresh as you could in that day, perhaps on a little wagon or some sort of something you could pull with an oxen, or what I'm trying to say is the most special people that Jesus called for what he wanted help in doing in his life were like you, ordinary folk, family men, young men that grew up in good families, knew about working. And these two special ones, or all four of these really that are named in this passage, learned to help the family, share the income, be good to the parents and neighbors and to each other. They were, and I guess what I'm trying to come in, help us to understand and try to think about and ask you to think with me. They were really very ordinary, working family men. They weren't in themselves that different. But when Jesus is about to begin his earthly ministry, which is going to last about 3 years, and he needs some help and helpers, he looked around and found some folks like you are. He didn't go for the scholars. He didn't go for anyone that was famous. Just ordinary family folk making a living. Daddy's teaching the sons to do what he had done so they'd be okay like he and his family was in there. I think that's amazing. If God were to do something spectacular in this area of southeast Texas, God would pick out some of you, because that's how he did it then. Ordinary folk, honest folk, good folk, people of faith, morally good, family folk, friends. Someone even mentioned, and I don't know exactly that you can know everything here, but probably from the way it seems in the passage, the men, the older men, had a business. And the sons were just going to follow like Dad in the business. Probably, and again, I don't know how you can say this except, well, common sense would say, these were pretty well-off folk. They had worked, they were organized, they were doing the things that they ought to do, and it was working, and people respected them, neighbors with them, friends with them, trusted them, honest folks, good folk. I suppose there were not a lot of careers except feed, food, feed for the animals, food for the adults. And those who didn't take care of themselves would have to somehow buy what they needed. And some you could trust, and some you couldn't, and some didn't have good. Seems like these were just ordinary but very good folk. And I'm just saying it again and again and again because I want you to know that God is, now there's some brilliant people working in Christian situations. Some folks in our day who have multiple degrees, years, you can just think. But mostly what God has done through all the ages, he's done it through folks like us. The only problem that has changed or been caused by change is we've kind of gotten to the place in our world today when we let everybody do it for us instead of doing it ourselves. And we expect somebody else to do it, and we can buy it, or we'll wait on them, or we will do. You know, if we would go back a little bit and become like some of the old folks, the Patricks up in Watt, Texas, or these people in this passage, maybe things would be better. Well, let's talk about that for just a moment. Now, this is not going to be anything taking a long time or anything, but it's going to help think a little bit if you think about this way. Now, I don't know all of the things that fishermen back in that day. It was not with a, by the way, right down the road as we were coming this morning, there were two young boys walking. They had been somewhere. Each one had a rod and reel in their head, and they were fishing somewhere. But back in this day, these guys and their families had learned to make a living by fishing. Now, the fishing was somewhat different if they were fishing for, as a business. Nets is usually what they used. They were quite large in size, square usually, and they could tie them certain on the boats, and as the boat would take the wind and go, well, then they would catch the fish, and take them and whatever process needed to be signed that way. But when I do this, I think a little bit something happened when we lived in another church. First time that I had done some of this, we were at Troop, Texas, for 6 years before we went to Orange. And there was a man that owned a restaurant there in town. He had a hamburger, steak kind of place. It was very good and very, very good folk. And they were not members of our church at the time. They did join in time, and I baptized nearly all of them through the years of 6 years while we were there. But one of them had some mounted bass in his restaurant or cafe, whatever you want to call it. They were pretty good size. They were over 8 pounds, and they were caught from Lake Stryker or Tyler or somewhere up through there. And I had never fished very much. A little bit as a kid. My dad worked all the time, and he didn't have hobbies really that he could do that. And there was no one ever took me fishing that I knew anything. So Lloyd, his name was, invited me to go fishing one day. I was hoping he would. I probably hinted that I would go if he would invite me. I don't remember that, but I wished to go. And anyway, one day Lloyd said, "Preacher, why don't you come and I'll take you fishing?" Well, let me tell you what he did to show you how good he was. At the time that I first met him, he had a flat-bottom boat, olive green, Everroot engine, same kind of color. You know what I'm saying? So we went out. But I found out that he went to fishing about 6 o'clock every morning, came back from fishing to run the restaurant through the noon time, then left his family to take care of the evening time because he went back fishing that afternoon. Did it nearly every day. He did it just about all 7 days of the week at first, but then as God did, not because of me, but the way God did it, they started coming to church, and families joined, and some were baptized, but we kept fishing. I didn't know anything about fishing with artificial anything with bass. So he taught me. I was 30-something years old when this started, latter 20s, 30s. Got pretty good in time, but I wasn't very good like he was. Now, I can tell you a lot of stories. I've got a fish on my wall at the house now that was that big. And I caught it one day, and Jeannie and I were fishing in a pond, or about a 2-acre little thing. It was Jeannie's birthday. She wanted to go fishing because I always went with Lloyd. And she said, instead of going with Lloyd, why don't you go with Jeannie today and we'll fish? What could I do? It was her birthday. So we get out there. The second cast I made, I caught an 8-pound, 2-ounce bass that morning. We packed up. She never did get to wet, I don't think, on her birthday. We took it to town. We showed it all off, to everybody. And finally we said, well, we know a doctor here in town, and we know he has a mount that he did over in Alabama, and let's go see what to do. Now, this doesn't sound much like a sermon, but I want to finish this one thing. It was really funny. They told us, here's the name of the company, here's what you do. So we called them over in Birmingham. They said, well, don't do anything, don't clean it, don't do anything, just put it in the freezer until it is hard as ice can be, and then wrap it in 2 inches of newspaper and put it on the bus. And they'll take it from Tyler, Texas to Birmingham, Alabama. So we did. Now, you know how long it takes to get a mount done, usually. 6 months, 9 months, a year or so. It came back in 12 days on the bus. It's still the same color it was however many years ago, 50 years ago. It's beautiful, okay? Now, what I'm saying all that is to try to hook you. Oh, wasn't that funny? Okay, I'm just being silly, but what I'm trying to get us to, I'm going to do this now. What kind of people did Jesus look for? Well, fishermen, for one thing. They were ordinary. I've already said that several times, but I want you to know, if God's going to do much in this church, in this area, it's going to be done through people like you. So some ordinary folk. Well, we talked about fishing boats Did you notice in this passage they were cleaning things up after they had been fished down and keeping the boats and the nets and all the stuff? So they not only were doing something pretty ordinary, but something pretty difficult with some skills. But it demanded work. I wonder, do you reckon that God's called too many people to do a lot for him that weren't doing something pretty good even before? Ordinary, down-to-earth, hard-working people. Again, I'm trying to get to us where we can understand, even if this young man we're talking about now or whoever comes in time to be your pastor, how brilliant he might be, how much he knows, you know what I'm saying? Most of what's going to be done by any church, well, my goodness, if we have 50 people or 80 people or 200 people, they can do so much more than one person. We need to accept working for the Lord, in a sense. Now, it was not work in the same sense, but they didn't keep being in their other career. They weren't fishermen from then on. They left their nets, they left their father, and they followed Jesus for the next 3 years or so, listening, learning, sharing, giving, sacrificing. Now, certainly without Jesus, nothing could have changed. But look at how Jesus did his mission and his work. Finding some folks just like us. Working folks. In fact, you might say, well, they had a little business, but they were the only ones employed in their own little business. And it was hot, hard work, and sometimes somewhat frightening, dangerous, but they kept going. Now, I'm still on the fish thing, so let's do it just kind of quick, and I'll be through this morning. I was fishing with Lloyd one day. Shuttleworth was his last name. I was fishing with him, and we were fishing on Lake Stryker. I was never real good at this now. Okay, I'm grown. He had done it since all his life. But he'd say, "Preacher, throw it right over there." You know, I'd get pretty close. This particular time, I know there was a stump here over to our left. He had a flat bottom boat. Ended up got the big fancy ones, by the way. But anyway, we get over here, and now he had all taught me, you've cast here and here. You can do 4 this way, 2 if you were switching hands. So learn to do this way, do this. He knew everything about it. I knew nothing. So I flipped it over there. I thought, man, I'm going to get it. And he said, no. I said, right up against that stump. I thought I'd done pretty good. I got mine out of the way. He threw it over there. He might have taken some old bark off that stump. And he had a fish. So I learned from him. And I tried, and I tried, and I tried. We'd go sometimes. We couldn't get there, say, till 3 o'clock if I couldn't go before that, when I could go. And so we would go, and we'd fish till dark. And lots of times we would get there, and it was difficult, and you have something else to do, and he had something else to do. But I tell you, I'm like a little kid when I'm playing, whether it's golf or tennis or fishing or whatever. I'll stay and stay and stay, and I don't want to go ahead until I catch the next one or, do the next one. And I kind of think when I read this, what's a fisherman do, especially if he's fishing for a living and he's not catching much? He just keeps on. That's what I'm trying to say about our church. You've been serving God a long time, most of you. And you've been teachers and singers and leaders and, financial. You've taken care of it. If something were to happen now, today, you'd take care of it. If you needed something new, you'd sacrifice to do it. That's the kind of folks Jesus was calling fishermen. You know, everything needed to be done, and you just get in there and you keep on doing it. Last thing, there's lots of things you could add to this. I hope you don't think it's silly. I hope you take the message here. Jesus, and it's in the Bible. We're reading what this is happening I'm talking about. Wonder what happened if things didn't go well sometime. Reckon they had days they didn't catch enough. Had you ever been, it's kind of silly to say this, have you ever been fishing and you just almost wouldn't quit that last cast? You know you had to go, it's time to go, it's start to go, they're thinking the time, the watch is this, I'll get it done. And you just have just one more. Reckon if you'd have just one more time invited that person you had invited to church, you might have come the next time. Maybe we have to, and it's silly to say it this way, but you get the point I'm trying to make. Maybe we need to change the lure. They're not hitting on this today. One day we had some, I'm going to quit after this. Or I may hunt the rest of the afternoon or fish. I don't want to. We were fishing some lures, and it doesn't matter the name. Some of you would know it, but I'm not going to try to teach you everything I know. I got to keep the fishes where I know they are. I hadn't fished in years now. But anyway, it was a chrome bait, a lure, and a black top. Okay, and we'd been catching fish on that lure for several days, maybe weeks. We went that day, and it would not even get a fish to look that way, much smell it or bite it. You know what Lloyd did? He knew everything. Sometimes I got mad at him. He knew everything I didn't know anything. He said, Lynn, put that one off. Preacher, get that same bait. It's blue on top instead of black. Put it on. First cast. Boom, boom. Some of you that fish a lot know about bass, and they just do that. They got off this, got on this. If you had the black top, fine. One right back black, didn't do a thing. He knew every time what to do and the right way. And when I think about these, about Peter and the other apostles and the fathers and the family and the job, it was a job. It wasn't just fun for them, but don't you know they were excited when they did have a good day? They just kept doing and kept doing and kept doing. When they need to change or do better, they just keep doing. What I'm trying to say, and I'm through with this right now, we know what to do. We've been doing it, we church folks, for years. We get tired sometime. Sometimes we say, I'm going to let somebody else do it. God still needs some fishers of men. And let me ask you, and with this I'll stop, who are the fishers of men in our congregation? You waiting for the new preacher to reach everybody? Some new folks may join. They may be good going out and inviting folks in ministry. Just common sense what I'm trying to say. In this group, Jesus still needs some fishers of men who are dedicated to tell them about Jesus and what he's done, and about sin and forgiveness and life eternal and good life. But we all kind of wait for somebody else to do it. But right when Jesus was getting started, if you look at it and think about it, he picked people just about like us. I don't know exactly what God wants for all of us. But as long as we have life and have ability, he really wants us to be fishers of men. Tell your family, tell your neighbors, tell your co-workers, tell your fishing buddies, or at the football game, or wherever you are. We need to reach out and love and teach and help and care, and let Jesus then work through us for his fishers of men. You could do it. I couldn't fish at all, but I got pretty good. And sometimes we say, well, I don't know. Well, you can learn and you can do it, and the Lord's going to protect you, and he's going to speak through you. So let's think about accepting and becoming fishers of men for Jesus. Let's bow together in prayer. The invitation